Hello, Namaste. My name is Avitoli Jimo. I teach anthropology at the University of Delhi. Today, my topic is on tribal arts and aesthetics. Art is an essential part of all cultures. Art is other type of language, one without words, but expresses ideas and forms, and serves to maintain and develop its culture. The pictorial language expresses the content more meaningfully. Making images is one of the central ways by which humankind ritualizes experience and gains personal, the ineffable, the unspeakable, and ultimate substance of reality. The concept of aesthetic is embedded in all societies, whether it is used for decoration or adorning the material and body aspects by people in all societies. The constant need of humans to express thoughts and fantasies in the form of visual or other sensory production has been discovered from archaeological sites. For example, a red hand stencil from Spain where the Neanderthals resided. Now, these arts, which have been long preserved among the strata of glacial caves, need to be understood. It would certainly reflect the notion of the existing culture and ideas of pre-existing ancient culture. Now, in viewing the timeline of evolution of visual expression in the form of art, it would be said that there have been inundated structural and sensory complexities. Different anthropological approaches over the years. Franz Boas' theory of art was inspired by the ideas which were dominant in Western art education, that artists needed to develop technical skills to be able to realize their creative products. Boas argued that non-representational imagery was similarly skillful and artistic. Boas tried to argue that unbiased studies of form and techniques would produce objective analysis which could show how art exists within the context of culture. Unfortunately, Boas's take on the aspect of skill, however, was informed by the unconventional Western discourses of technical mastery at that time. The functionalist school defined art as an institution, and so it was placed in the domain of Western conception. To them, culture was like a machine producing order and repetitive movement. The functionalist perspective of art in many ways illustrated the influence of industrialization and mechanization. The functionalist usage of art demonstrated a strong belief in the universal creative potential of all humans and criticized elitist discourses of fine art. The domain of aesthetic is not necessarily associated with art. Aesthetics is the socially derived practice of categorizing and evaluating visual phenomena. That is, shapes, patterns, forms, whether it is natural or man-made, according to a cultural scheme of value. Aesthetics has always been considered as a relative term irrespective of the absoluteness as perceived by a particular culture or society, since the diversity in sensorial experience varies minutely even with flickering details. India's arts and aesthetics has always been portrayed in terms of eco-aesthetics due to the close resemblance with the ecology portrayed and innate nature of relationship with the flora and fauna around. Every state and union territories across the country have their own distinct identities embedded in their cultural traditions, which speaks of its diverse and colorful vibrancy while conveying the shared values and aesthetics. These art forms encompasses large range of utilitarian and decorative media, which includes use of cloth, wood, paper, clay, metal, and other items which are capturing not only the interest of visiting tourists but art collectors for their sense of ethnic beauty. The 19th century anthropologists were eagerly involved in the study of art and material culture. The earlier attempts to define art by many well-known anthropologists has been disregarded in terms of universal acceptance, considering that in a particular subjective background they hold true to the meaning. In the museum world, the term art tends to be associated with the more highly valued collections from classical civilizations whose objects were part of European heritage. Anthropologists do not practically have any exposition or experience with art in general and ethnological art in particular. Naturally, they are placed too far from art in its overall form. This view turns to be contradictory and even upsets the equilibrium. Many renowned social anthropologists like Robert Redfield, Elwin, Bird, Boas, Nodelman, Adams, Batson, Fegg, Leighton, and all of them have carried out intensive works on ethnological art. The term ethnological art was used as a substitute of primitive or tribal art, and it has been adopted following the coinage of terminology which was made by Hasselberger in 1961. So most of the aforementioned researchers have included the motifs, styles, technology, function in the treatment and exercise on art forms. The ethnological art represents the society with its multidimensional facets. At the same time, this overall methodology may be modified to some extent, and thereby the art objects can be used as markers of social, cultural, economic, and religious attributes. Franz Boas, in his book on primitive art, 1927, noted that the treatment given to the subject is based on two principles that should guide all investigations of life among primitive people. First, the fundamental sameness of mental processes in all races and in all cultural forms of the present day. Second, the consideration of every cultural phenomenon as a result of historical happenings. He certainly saw studies of form in art as having the potential to reveal historical patterns and relationships between groups, but was fundamentally opposed to simple evolutionary theories. Raymond Firth maintained a strong interest in indigenous art, writing on Maori and New Guinea art early on in his career, and later produced more synthetic analysis. Claude Lévi-Strauss has defined art as an ordering system of signs and communication, like language, to form a hierarchical structure which forms the foundation of the core beliefs of the society. Vera Elvin was one of the first scholars to realize the importance of tribal art in India. He systematically documented the wall paintings and the rituals associated with this tradition. His contribution for the documentation of rich ethnographic details is valuable for studying the tribal culture of India. J.L. Fisher, as early as 1960s, realized the importance of tribal art in relation to rock art and proposed several hypotheses for comparisons of the rock art of India. Wakankar and Brooks, in their book Stone Age Painting in India, have also attempted to compare the rock art and tribal art, particularly of Korku, Warli, Gond, and Saura tribes. They also compared them with the Chalcolithic and the early historic decorated ceramics from Central India. They have thrown light on the images of Saura wall paintings in their book and has also sent forth a plea to researchers to take up the comparative study of rock art and tribal art. What makes tribal aesthetic unique is its predominant adaptation to social ecological culture and religious ideologies incorporated among the members. The main characteristic could be summarized as follows: the tradition of oral documentation and passing of the cognitive purpose to the new generation through folk art, folk songs, folklores, customs, and ritual reflecting experience, reality, and social structure. It is hard to trace the origin and authors since it is based on mythological characters. The tribal aesthetic provides a picturesque description of solidarity, details of cultural fragments incorporated in common situations of everyday life as validated through rituals and institutions. They also function to entertain and maintain conformity and acceptance of behavioral patterns while educating the members of the society about their cultural roots and social identity. In terms of Indian tribal art and aesthetic, the folk art focuses on reflection of day-to-day lifestyle in the form of visual art, performance through songs and dance as well as in oral literature. Folk art comprises of painting on several medium, be it for decorative purposes or religious performances. The following ethnographic studies of Saura art of Orissa, WARLI art from Maharashtra, and ZEME NAGA wood carving art from the Northeast India are exemplary in explaining the core constituents and the existence and expression of these art forms. Lanja Saura is one of the 75 particularly vulnerable tribal groups, PVTGs, in India, and one among the 13 other PVTGs in Orissa. The highest diversity in scheduled tribe population is found in Orissa, with 62 different tribes in total. The illustrious Saura art attracts the eye of an onlooker. The magnitude of attraction that it compels the onlookers to stay mesmerized cannot be simply explained without understanding the culture and beliefs behind it. Saura iconography has fascinated many researchers, appealing and charming ethnographers, visual artists, and ethnomusicologists from all over the world. Saura art, or simply called Italans by Elwin, are also known as Anitals and Editals. It varies according to the area. These beautiful wall paintings are called editals. To simply put forward, a Saura art is a house inside a house serving as a temple for the benevolent spirits and a prison for the malevolent spirits. Thus, this adornment of wall art is a propitiation method to ensure balance in the metaphysical and theological world so that the people could live in harmony. The symbolic aspect of any art form is quintessential in exploring and going deep into the foundation of the art. The symbolic interpretations of the Saura paintings can be understood from the perspective of the following purposes for which they are created: icons for appeasing spirits, icons for promotion of health and welfare, icons for fertility and harvest, icons for childbirth, icons for the dead, icons for the welfare of the village, icons for festivities, icons for those who have been abroad as in, for example, those working in the tea gardens of Assam, and so on, icons for marriage and birth anniversary. Werer Elwin has mentioned 60 different types of editals, which he had categorized under 7 groups based on the purpose. There are also reconstruction of few editals, combining all the gods whom they may not worship, but more like an amalgamation of what the Saura religious pantheon was constructed of. This is an Anjuman edital, and it depicts the name-giving ceremony of a child. The birth of a child is depicted here with the house resembling the womb of the mother. Until birth, the child is under the protection of the gods, with the sacred peacock guarding the womb from any malevolent spirit. The sun god Uyungsom is worshipped during name-giving ceremony, and he is the father of the stars and this world. His presence denotes that the child is born with his blessings. 7 dancers are dancing to the beats of Dagudu, welcoming the child to this world. Often 7 female dancers are present in ceremonies to symbolize the sacred value associated with number 7. A bull and an elk are offered as sacrificial offering to the sun god for naming the newborn child. People are carrying the hunted elk on a Buddha, and women are bringing grains to offer to God. The Kudan boy, that is a female shaman, is making the jadak, that is horoscope, for the newly born child and predicting its future. And should there be any obstruction in the future of the newly born baby, the female shaman or the Kundan boy will suggest preventive measures. The sepoys of Raudasum, that is a chief deity, are guarding the ritual to witness and ensure everything goes smoothly as prescribed. Any divergence in the ritual will affect both the child and parents in future. The tree of life is shown to depict the source of life, just as tree obtains nourishment from being rooted in the soil. Likewise, a child needs to be rooted in this world while seeking blessings from all the gods. It is quite intriguing to analyze the nature of these paintings and how closely the cognitive aspects of these paintings are associated with ecology, social structure, and religious custom and beliefs. Saura art is not the only one to display such art forms in India. These triangular anthropomorphic bodies with stick-like limbs can also be found in another famous tribal art in Maharashtra, that is the WARLI. Both Saura and WARLI painting tradition have emerged at different points of time in human evolution and history. There were a number of aspects in both the traditions that resembled with each other. WARLI painting is a form of tribal art mostly created by the WARLI who inhabit the North Sahyadri range in Maharashtra. WARLI art follows a visual style with highly repetitive motifs depicting the lifestyle and culture of the tribal community to carry forward the values and traditional knowledge from generation to generation. Although in several ways, the WARLI painting style resembles Saura art, with the motifs featuring stick-like features as earlier discovered in prehistoric paintings, but several differences exist apart from the striking similarities. WARLIs living in rural settings incorporate much of the surrounding into the painting, usually using the walls of the thatched mud huts as a canvas. These paintings depict the scenes from rural India where men and women are portrayed while engrossed in their daily household chores and respective vocations. The flora and fauna are also featured in the paintings. Like the Saura art, the psychic nature of time in all spheres of life, festivities and merrymaking in the day-to-day life, expressing the various moods and joyous nature of the people are the central theme. WARLI paintings are traditionally the domain of WARLI women. These paintings are made on the walls of the house by married women whose husbands are still alive. But over the years, as the contact with the mainstream culture and the commercial value increased, this art was taken over by the menfolks. WARLI painting can be divided into 4 categories: the gods, the people, the animals, and rites and rituals. The WARLI paint around 4 major categories. They have the old folk stories, which they paint about their gods and how they created the world. They also paint on the themes of God punishing people for showing disrespect to Mother Earth. These paintings convey their devotional nature towards the supreme power of the nature and their gods. Under the category of the people, the WARLI mostly paint about good deeds which ought to be done in lifetime, as well as wicked deeds one must abstain from. Third, the WARLI tell the stories of their pet animals like dogs, cows, buffalo, hen, goats, and all other animals living with them in the jungle. However, tiger remains the most popular animal for painting. The most famous WARLI paintings are the chalks drawn by the Suvasini during the marriage and the Tarpa dance. The paintings are done with 2 colors, the base of cow dung or red mud and the figures in white. This white color is made by grounding of rice and mixing with tree gum. With the coming in contact with modernity, the WARLI have started incorporating images of train, aeroplane, rickshaw, and other modern modes of transport at the same time maintaining the traditional art form. However, their painting mostly depicts their social, economic, cultural, spiritual, and cosmological perspective. There are very close similarities and dissimilarities between the Saura art and the WARLI art. It is necessary to understand them since very often these 2 art forms are confused by aesthetic art lovers and collectors. So keeping in mind the underlying cognitive aspects and socio-religious values, let us understand the real purpose of these art forms and in what way these differences and indifferences serve in establishing the cultural identity of the respective art forms. Both WARLI and Saura art use color coating on the wall and rice paste for painting, the canvas being square or rectangular with the motifs in triangular figures. While WARLI art depicts festive celebrations, their Saura art has deeper meaning in terms of theological beliefs. The concept of sacred is more strictly embedded in the Saura art. The rich artistic traditions from the ZEME tribe in northeast India is in the form of wood carving on the gates of the fortress or village. They exemplify the power and historic significance of the community. In a ZEME village, there are 4 fortresses belonging to each of the 4 clans. These ancient fortresses are strategically placed at the inroad junctions of the village's periphery. Guarded by the respective skills of the surrounding area, each gate houses a massive wooden plank with a symbol-like artistic carvings of unsporting male warrior figures, the mask-like wooden enemy heads, and carvings of the great legendary animal that is Mithun, Arbos frontalis. Structurally, the fortresses are similar. They have elevated staircases enclosed by walls on either side. So over time, as tin sheets were introduced into the village, the entry gates as well as the poles were covered with the same to enhance its sheer life. The relation of the fortresses with war, headhunting, and subsequent security is accentuated both by the prohibition for women to climb the walls as well as the presence of different paintings inscribed on each of the 4 entrance gates. One of the fortresses in a ZEME NAGA village called ZEME exhibits a 5-headed man holding a rifle in the right hand and wide in a Mithun horn on the left, while standing on a Mithun hat. An additional line of 5 wooden hats run at the bottom. The second fortress gate has a rather colorful display, wherein the gate is divided into 2 sections, each of which presents a male figurine sporting a headgear of hornbill feathers. The perceived uniformity in the depictions of male figurines exhibiting hunting repertoire at the gates is a symbolic representation of the village being guarded by gatekeepers at all times, thereby ensuring safety and protection against all likely enemies. The other consistent element is the carving of Mithun head, reflecting its significance in ZEME culture. The men have continually come to associate themselves with Mithun for strength and bravery, the animal being the largest and the most strenuous. The gates are replaced as well as improvised by the respective clan members. For instance, while formerly spears comprised the only large hunting repertoire, in the aftermath of Second World War and subsequent introduction of modern ammunition, you'll find that rifles were adopted into the hunting toolkit and have been ever since manifested on the gates. Therefore, in addition to continually tracing cultural change, the fortress gates acknowledge the flux the ZEME is situated within, despite its perceived isolation and inaccessibility. In the ZEME belief system, odd numbers are considered to be auspicious. Its significance lies in the deeper philosophies of the indigenous faith, where a cycle of life and death always must end with life. The wood-carved structures among the ZEME NAGA community are ethereal in a unique way. As sensory perception received from the wood-carved surfaces, one can feel the effort put into it and the creator still embalmed in the very moment of hand carving. With the world becoming interconnected like never before, the mobility of people has also increased. This has led to the inflow of tourists, scholars who are interested in visiting and learning about the exotic, the strange, and the other that is different from them. Now, in due course of time, changes have been noted in the art of the tribal societies. There has been concern about the art in contemporary period as whether they are authentic representation of traditional art. The concept of traditional art is blurry and debatable, as there has been several claims in defining authenticity. Some suggest that these forms do not change with the passage of time, while the modern forms, which are commercialized and marketed to reach its global consumers, say otherwise. There are also prospects of acknowledging whether commercialization of an artwork defies its authentic traditional sense, and in some cases the value of sacred and profane. These modern art forms have evolved into more aesthetically pleasing to the eye, with colorful composition, pleasing symmetric structures using materials which are more sustainable and economically accessible. Several government and non-government agencies have come forward to promote the tribal art forms of India, keeping in mind the need to provide better livelihood to the artists so that they continue to preserve the traditional knowledge that comes with the tribal paintings. The Saura tribe is considered to be a particularly vulnerable tribal group, with their community undergoing transition and liminality. So to compete with the demand of aesthetically pleasing artwork in the market, workshops and trainings are being organized for the community members who are interested to learn the skill. Now, it proves to be a source of income through government initiatives aimed at empowering the community, enhancing livelihood, and managing the natural resources with communal indulgence. They also help in marketing these products, ensuring that the artist or the creator is able to get recognition and the due payment so that they could sustain and support the family. With the global demand of these artworks as souvenirs, a foundation-building approach has been put in action. And all these organizations, all these programs are working hard on producing the Saura art in the form of silk canvas, frame photos, and ceramic vessels, along with many others. So the Orissa PVTG Empowerment and Livelihood Improvement Program, their goal is to achieve enhanced living conditions and reduce poverty of the PVTG and other poor communities. Jivya Soma Mashe, an artist in Thane district, has played a great role in making the WARLI paintings more popular. Coca-Cola India launched a campaign featuring WARLI painting in order to highlight the ancient culture and represent a sense of togetherness. The campaign was called Come Home on Deepavali and specifically targeted the modern youth. The campaign included advertising on traditional mass media combined with radio, internet, and out-of-home media. Art represents the deep-rooted beliefs around which the culture exists. The Saura well paintings represent elegance, charm, aesthetic, and also the ritualistic association. These pictograms are their literature and philosophy. The carvings of human figure, heads, spear, mitten horns on ZEME NAGA fortress gates are symbolic representations of their ferocious headhunting days and prestige that revolve around owning Mithun. Like Saura, these wood carvings are the folklore and philosophy of the ZEME NAGA. It is pertinent to rejuvenate the fading glories of traditional art. At the same time, there is a need to give attention to the vulnerable tribal groups with a deserving recognition and respect for their cultural heritage. The preservation and sustenance of this priceless cultural traditional art form is urgent. Attempts have been made to conserve the physical ecology as well as the cultural ecology of the ethnic tribal communities by empowering them through a participatory protected area management approach. The tribal communities should be encouraged to enrich their ethnic heritage and skills. The fabric of tribal culture is reflected through folk art, folklore, folk music, folk dance, and custom. Importance should be given to preserve the indigenous traditions and knowledge despite any changes in their social institution. Overall, there is a need to effectively protect the indigenous people and their cultures from external threats by recognizing their traditional rights over land, water, and forests. Should there be development, their rich culture and tradition should not suffer setback. In the world of art and aesthetic, as elegantly displayed in museum cases and exhibition, a serious question arises. When recognized art is displayed in an exhibition, it carries the artist's name. Yet, in contrast, the art from a tribal community is always labeled as primitive art. Even in the present times, there is no effort to display the credentials of the artist and the effort behind it. An object cannot be studied out of its context. But there are cases where the surroundings of an object are as important as the object itself and contribute strongly to its meanings. At the end, I would like to acknowledge the contribution of Mr. Somenrat from Department of Anthropology, University of Delhi, to the text and photographs of this module.